try to run against Ted Cruz in 2018.
Wow. This is amazing. This is my wife, Amy. Once you all do that. Thank you so much for making us feel so welcome here in Houston. I can't tell you or properly express what I feel right now and how encouraged and inspired I am already, and the energy that that's going to give us and the drive that it will put in place as we continue to go forward just a little more than 48 hours after we announced in El Paso, Texas, that we're running to represent this great city as a great city. I see we've got some kids in the room, and I just met Mia, who's 5 years old, who is the cutest thing in the world, and really she should be up here at the center of your attention and your focus right now. And for that reason, I'm not going to repeat the mistake I made when we showed up in Dallas and we had a crowd like this one, and right off the bat I dropped an F-bomb. And just like that, Amy was with me on the stage, but I was so fired up, and there were so many people there, and I was so excited, and Amy, who has the most exquisitely accurate, sensitive BS detector in the world, insisted that, look, if we're going to do this, and if I'm going to stay married to you, then you got to be yourself, and you got to be honest, and we don't script this stuff, and you don't have a pollster who tells you what to say, or a consultant who writes out your one of 2 people out of 535 in the United States Congress, House and Senate, that doesn't take a dime of corporate cash. You're not going to slow down. And so she says, you're gonna be yourself. You're gonna be real. And so here I was thinking in Dallas on Friday night, I'm being real. This is me. Our little daughter used to charge me $1 for every time I swore, and we soon realized that was not sustainable. I'm trying, but I slipped. I slipped, and unfortunately for anybody who was there or saw the Facebook Live feed, that slip became a slide, and you won't hear me repeat that here today. But I wonder, and I'm doing that for Mia, by the way. Mia, thank you for keeping me honest. I think about that because when we were watching the 2016 presidential campaign, there were some really crazy things being said. And you wonder, when the candidate who's now our president referred to Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists, was that a slip? Did that just come out of his mind? Was he thinking that? He shouldn't have said it. He feels bad. He's not the one to apologize. And he really won't act on that when he's president. And so we'll just chalk that up as a slip. Or that when a Mexican-American judge, and it doesn't matter where he was born, but he happens to have been born in the United States, makes a ruling, delivers a judgment that is in conflict to the interests of Donald Trump, and he says, because that judge is a Mexican American, he cannot rule objectively, and diminishes him based on his ethnicity. Is that a slip? No. And when we have somebody who says that his major homeland security policy platform rests on a 2,000-mile wall built 30 feet high, made of concrete from Brownsville to San Diego, California. Is that a slip? Did it just come into his mind, or is that something else? When he talks about banning Muslims from this country, or makes fun of somebody who has a physical disability, or belittles the judiciary, or breaks down the norms that have kept this country, despite some of its flaws and the challenges that we've overcome, the greatest country this earth has ever known. Is that a slip? Or are we on a slide right now? And Amy and I have 3 Mias at home. We have Ulysses, who's 10, and Molly, who's 8, and Henry, who's 6. And when I first started this job, I was sworn in 2013, and not a full year in, the junior senator from Texas, who might as well have just been the full-time candidate for president, shut down our federal government because he was worried that we were being too generous to too many people who needed health care too badly in order to live. And he shut it down for that reason. He shut it down because he put party over country, ideology over the interests of the people he served, and has used Texas for 4 years as a platform from which to pursue
Hey,
the
Cecile.
presidency.
Glad you're watching.
And I was home in the middle of that government shutdown. We had to be there at a moment's notice because we didn't know when we were going to have another vote. But there was this 24-hour reprieve and window when I could fly back to Texas and be with Amy and Ulysses and Molly and Henry. And I was putting Ulysses to sleep that night. I said, buddy, I'm glad I got to be back. You're not going to see me in the morning. I got to get back there. And he said to me, and it was one of the toughest questions anyone's ever asked me. He said, Dad, why did you want a job where you weren't going to ever see us? And at that time, I didn't know the answer to that. The government was shut down. We were deadlocked on some of the most important issues,
Very
some of the most
genuine.
basic issues to the government. And for the pursuit of someone's political career, we couldn't even function and operate and allow those who work at the VA to serve veterans, those who are taking care of service members at military treatment facilities to show up, Border Patrol agents who have one of the most dangerous, difficult jobs anywhere to go patrol along the border, customs officers who facilitate $90 billion in trade at the
Hey,
El Paso
Barbara,
Port
glad you could join
support
us.
500,000 jobs in the state of Texas. They couldn't show up to work. And so I had a hard time answering Ulysses. I said, look, bud, the reason we ran and the reason I'm flying back to Washington tomorrow is we made a commitment. We want to help people. We want to ensure that we stop talking about and finally act on comprehensive immigration reform. We want to make sure that healthcare is not a privilege. It's not a function of what you can afford or what you make or who you happen to work for or where you live or who you were born to. That it's a right. That's a human right. Every single one of us should be able to make it. I said, Ulysses, I ran for, and I'm trying to do my best, for the veterans in El Paso who have distinguished our community through their service to this country. And yet, despite coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder, or traumatic brain injury, or military sexual trauma, or traumatic amputations, the wounds of service and combat, the conditions that are unique to what they did for our country without question, that despite all of that, it takes not a week, not a month, it takes
Hey,
a
Francis.
year. If you're
Nice
lucky
to
to get a mental health care
be sharing
appointment
this
at the
experience
VA,
with you.
it's part of the reason that today, in this country, we'll lose 20 veterans. And I said, I want to help all of those people, Ulysses, and I want to do everything else that the people of El Paso depend on me for. And so we got back to work. We started to make progress. We turned around our VA in El Paso. There are 141 mental health centers for veterans in the United States. El Paso, when I was elected, ranked 141st in the nation. And we turned that around. We brought local, private, and public providers together. We got the VA to sign off on a pilot project for El Paso that's connecting with veterans who've earned it with the care that they need and that they deserve. We're making life better for the people that we represent. We're supporting our service members. We're trying to make sure that we have a strategy, that we've defined victory, that in the 16th year of our war in Afghanistan, after an authorization for the use of force in 2001 that has been used to invade 5 other countries, including Syria, where we've quintupled our force size, Yemen, where we just lost a service member, Somalia, Libya, Iraq. We're going to support those service members who are out there by making sure that we define victory, that we know why we've asked them to fight, what our interests are, and why that now that I'm 44 years old, one of my first memories of the Middle East was as a teenager hearing on the radio that George H.W. Bush was going to use military force in Iraq. And here we are, 5 presidents later, still there, using military force, trying to solve the world's problems on the backs of 20 and 21-year-old women and men from great states like Texas, without a strategy, and without asking the rest of us to pay a dime into their care. Since 9/11, the wars that we have fought have been put on the national credit card. You want to know why we have $20 trillion plus in debt? Don't let them blame you. Don't let them blame President Obama. It's on all of us. It's the wars that we fight without paying for them. And that's why last week I introduced a bill with Seth Moulton, Democrat of Massachusetts, Don Young, Republican of Alaska, Walter Jones, Republican of North Carolina, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans from the 4 corners of this country, that forces us to pay for the wars as we fight them. It's a amendment a lot more faster than going into them in the first place. And it's going to make sure that we have the resources to take care of those brave service members when they come back and they need us. It's going to make sure that we don't wait 40 years as we force the Vietnam-era generation of veterans to wait 40 years before we classified exposure to Agent Orange as a presumptive condition and started giving them the help that they need, that they earn, and that they deserve as Americans. It's going to ensure that we don't wait another year. It's already been 26 years since we sent service members from this country to the Gulf to begin fighting those wars and expose them to things that have caused conditions like Gulf War syndrome that we still don't recognize, or the chemical burn pits and other things that we're exposing our service members to today that are expensive to understand, to research, to innovate for, to find the cures, to treat the conditions for the long lives that we want them to lead. Our bill that sets up a trust fund for veterans generates $22 billion a year that can only be used for veterans. And no longer will there be an excuse. No longer will there be an excuse that, hey, we have the resources and the will to send you to war, but we just couldn't figure it out when you came back.
Bring them home!
So let's bring them home. And let's take care of them when they're here. So, we've been able to get some good things done. And we've been able to work across the aisle. And we've been able to take on some of the toughest issues in this country.
It's fun to see you here.
And if you're like Amy and me, you're worried about these slips that have turned into a slide. It's taken this country further down a path than we've ever been, at least in my lifetime. And one that doesn't have a good ending. A country that, wasn't me who said this, wasn't a House member, it was a Senator, a Republican, John McCain, who said, when you start referring to the press and the media as the enemies of the people, that's where dictatorships start.
In case you don't know, Jill, this guy is going to try to run against Ted Cruz in 2018.
And I know you are because you're here. You're anticipating the question that your kids are going to ask, not the question that Ulysses asked me, because you all get asked that too, right? There are folks who have jobs that are tougher, harder, far more difficult than mine is. Dads and moms who are deployed overseas right now or aren't going to see their kids for 9 months. whose kids have to know, even if they haven't been told, that it's possible that their mom or dad is going to sacrifice their lives for the betterment of this country. So I'm under no illusions that we have it harder than anybody else. Every one of us faces that question from our kid. Mom, Dad, why did you choose to do the things that you're doing? Why is life hard sometimes? But here's the question that we anticipate and that you anticipate, and it's the reason that you're here. Mom, Dad, Grandpa, Grandma. Back in 2017, when they were no longer talking about the wall, but they'd started building it. When they were no longer talking about banning refugees, but they'd already tried to do it. When they were no longer talking about imposing a religious test on the people who could come to a country of immigrants, built and comprised of refugees. Mom and Dad, when they talked about the press as the enemy of the people. When you knew what was happening, and you knew what we needed, and you knew what it took, what did you do? That's the question I care more about from Ulysses, from Mia, from our kids, from our conscience. And if you're like Amy and me, and I think you are because you're here, we're together, you're going to have a great answer for them. You're going to say, we didn't wait until 2020 for some hero to come in and save the day and begin working in a new administration in 2021 to end the war on drugs and ensure that no more kids have to be locked up or killed under this very noble but ultimately misguided and failed war, not just on drugs, but on people, at a time that this country, the majority of the states, have ended the prohibition on marijuana. Let's stop that here in Texas, across this country. Let's keep drugs out of schools and the topics out of the hands of criminals. And let's wake up to a real crisis of opioid use, abuse, addiction, and death in every single one of our communities. And let's help those people out. And let's not wait until 2020 or 2021, or let's not wait for someone else to get that done. Mom and Dad, did you wait for someone to fix our immigration system, to make sure that every working Texan could find a job that paid an honest day's wage for an honest day's work? Did you wait to make sure that women had access to life-saving, reproductive health care? A life and death issue for families throughout Texas, for women throughout Texas. After 2011, when we put more restrictions and prevented more people from accessing their rights and being able to make their own healthcare decisions, we began to lead the country in maternal mortality. In 2013, when we doubled down on a deadly strategy, we led Texas, the industrialized world, on maternal mortality. Yeah. Mom, Dad, did you wait until 2020? Did you wait for someone else to come along? Or did you take the future and these matters into your own hands? And did you decide that it wasn't going to be 2020, that it was going to be 2018, and that 2018 started right here today in Houston, with all of us making a commitment to each other. That's the choice that we have before us. Here's some things that we can do right away. We did the first and most important thing. We showed up. We got out on a Sunday on what turns out to be a beautiful day in Houston. And we're inside because we weren't sure that it was going to be that way. You got to remember that I come from El Paso, Texas, in the Chihuahuan Desert. We don't understand this thing called rain. Here's something you can do in addition, además. There's a website, betofortexas.com. And I will not be offended, nor will I think it's rude if you get on your cell phone right now. Punch that in and sign up. What people want to know, there's one person, at least in this Senate race, who stepped forward and who has stepped up. And what people want to know, and you want to know this, and maybe Amy wants to know this, is this for real? Is this really going to happen? Are we going to make it work this time? And it's a self-fulfilling deal. If you make it real, it's real. The harder you work, the luckier we get, the better chances that we're going to win. And so you've got to get online, you've got to register, you've got to donate 20, 35, 50 bucks. Our average donation right now from thousands of Texans is $34. You can move that number up or down, it doesn't matter to me. Give what you can, what you think is important, what you think is going to make a difference. And then here's the thing, and you know this just as well as I do. If you don't share it, it didn't happen. If it's not on social media, it doesn't exist. If you didn't take a picture, it's questionable whether it ever occurred. So
Hey,
I'm going to
Joyce.
stick around, and I'm going to take pictures with you.
If it's not on
I'll take
social
pictures
media, it
for
didn't
you.
happen.
I'll take pictures of you. But I want you to share that, and I want you pick the issue. You tell them, I'm supporting Beto work. I just donated 20 bucks. I got on board. I'm going to work with this guy because he showed up, he listened to me, and he doesn't take any political action committee money. He's going to do this, fueled by, driven by, funded by Texas.
Hey, Aunt Sharon, in case you don't know, this guy is going to try to run against Ted Cruz in 2018.
Llegar en cada comunidad en nuestro estado. Escuchar a cada familia y servir todos los intereses adentro de nuestro estado. Y no importa si nacieron aquí en los Estados Unidos, o si son migrantes de México o otras partes del mundo. Cada persona es importante. Cada persona necesitamos tratar con respeto y dignidad. Compartirlo con sus amigos. Share that with your friends, with your family, with your coworkers, with your neighbors, and even better, if you can. And the internet's a really big world now. Share it with strangers, people you don't know, folks who live in different parts of the state. Tell them why you were excited. People want to know whether or not we have momentum, whether or not this is going to move, whether or not it's going to have the legs to last through the primary and into the general election, and ensure that at a time that the balance is out of whack, that every lever of power is within one party, and we no longer function. The government's only funded through the end of this month. We can't fix healthcare, we can't replace it, we can't do anything right now. That if we want balance, if we want to check on this president, it runs through the Senate. And the only way, and listen, I'm happy for you to give to other Senate candidates in other states as we try to hold on to some of these seats. I urge you not to give more than 10 bucks, but give if you must. Give if you must. But let's stop using Texas as an ATM machine for other states. Let's keep that So support those other candidates. Support these local city council races. Harris County, Houston, you've done a phenomenal job. At the official level. County Commission, give there as well. But if you want to take back your country, you can't just play defense. You can't just hold on to those seats. You're going to have to take back the Senate. And if you want to take back the Senate, you're going to have to take back Texas. And the way to take back Texas started when we announced in El Paso, the furthest western corner, Friday morning. It ran through Dallas, Waco, Austin, and it's here today in Houston. It's time for you to get on board, for us to work together, for us to make a difference, to take our country back, to take the Senate back, and we'll do it by taking Texas back. Thank you.